It's funny, Fuzzy Belvedere, how a certain device, i.e., the ROG Xbox Ally, is being touted as a step or tip of spear for what Xbox is going to do for next generation. Now, for some people, next generation doesn't officially start until said console or new console is in that generation, whether that be Xbox, PlayStation, or Nintendo. Now, Nintendo's next generation, even though it is a couple of years old in regards to its power and its hardware, the Switch 2 is their next generation hardware. And I would imagine this is going to run probably about 7 or 8 years. It might run even 10 years. We know the power of the Switch, Switch 2 more specifically, is about a PlayStation 4 Pro, which is fine. A lot of beautiful games on a PlayStation 4 Pro, so there's that. But where I want to focus the attention is some of the conversation that's happening. And who comes into conversation with that is Paris Lilly. I don't know if it's Paris. It's a little bit early for the West Coast. It's only 7:05 there. I don't think Paris is up yet, but he might be. And usually when I say his name like 3 times, he shows up like a genie, which is awesome. But Paris has been talking about launching PlayStation games from his console. I saw him put a post up earlier regarding Towerborn crossplay on the handheld via Xbox and Steam, which is great. Tom Warren has been a little scandalous with announcing that he in fact is going to launch Spider-Man Miles Morales, which from his Xbox, from his ROG Ally, which is not the official Xbox one yet because that's not out. It is his. He's in the preview program, but the one that I guess the star of this conversation is Destin Legary. Now, Destin, I know a lot of people have issues with some of the things that he says. I like Destin a lot. I have not had it. Did I meet Destin in real life? I don't know if I did. I might have. It wasn't this year. It might have been last year. And I've been a fan of his work for a while. We don't always agree, and I would imagine some of the things that I've said, Destin's like, yeah, that BoomStick, he's a lunatic, and that's fine. But I saw people going after him, and I actually have a couple of those tweets. I got to read them verbatim because it's just I think this is crazy. Like one of the tweets that got a lot of smoke for him was this: PlayStation fanboys argued with me for 2 years, saying PlayStation games would not run on next Xbox handheld or console. Now it's been proven true. Questions have been answered. This is not console warring. You're just mad at the answer. And he is not wrong, ladies and gentlemen. What we are talking about is currently there are a lot of people in the community as well that have ROG Allies or ROG Ally X consoles. Fuzzy, they are launching PlayStation games that they own on Steam from these handhelds. I've seen, again, the one thing that we will never do on this show is use someone's name, for anti-whatever. That's why when I say we don't use the names, it's not because I'm afraid of smoke. I'll punch somebody in the face. It's not a problem. But I just don't feel that we need to stoop to some of the levels that others have in order to gain subs. Like I said, folks, make no mistake, I'm a gentleman. I choose peace because I like being peaceful. But I can be an a-hole, and I prefer never to do that because that's a real nasty side of me that I don't like, which is why I don't get into the console war nonsense or the smoke or any of the, pointing out people's flaws. That's not for me to do. I like to keep it about video games, and that's exactly what we're going to do here. But, just looking at some of the responses that Destin got, the nameless will remain nameless, as they should. But, folks, I'm here to tell you, this honestly should not come off as a surprise. It really shouldn't. But the fact that the Xbox Ally and Ally X literally has Xbox in the title, literally will launch with a UI that was designed by Xbox, literally have an Xbox button on these things. Folks, if you are having a one-to-one problem with equating that this is an Xbox, then I can't help you. I don't have a PhD. I can offer some suggestions where you might want to sit down on a couch with somebody and hash this shit out. Because Jesus, it's to the point where I read some people's tweets, and when I read it, the minute I start, it's block or it's mute. But I don't finish reading them because I'm almost embarrassed for some of these grown men. These are grown men. These aren't 15-year-olds. We're not in the schoolyard, ladies and gentlemen, flipping baseball cards or trying to say that Nintendo does what Genesis don't or Genesis does what Nintendo don't. We're old men. And the fact that there are people like really that have channels that have lots of subs that are sticking their poles in the ground, to try and win some sort of an argument about this not being an Xbox. Folks, I'm here to tell you, it's honestly the saddest thing I've ever seen. And I am embarrassed for some of these grown humans. And again, we don't name names because we never want to embarrass anybody because that's not the way we roll here at Double Barrel Gaming. Mm-hmm. But Fuzzy Belvedere, I want to have this conversation because I think it's time. We've talked about the handhelds. You've seen the title. The title is going to be the second half of the show because, folks, I'm here to tell you, I honestly believe PlayStation 6, and it's years out. I don't think it's before 2027. Hell, it might even be 2028. I'm telling you right now, Xbox already has an advantage on a console that's still in its design phase on paper. We'll get to that second half of the show, why I believe that's an actual happening right now. But let's talk handhelds. Because again, the one raging fact by a lot of the PlayStation vocalists, if you will, were that PlayStation is going to block Steam from allowing you to launch a game on Xbox. And when that didn't happen, then the narrative was switched. And again, this is where the goalpost moving comes in, folks. You know, where, well, that's not really an Xbox, Mr. BoomStick XL. Where you know, it's not. It's made by somebody else. It's when it's Microsoft, it's an Xbox. Folks, OEM, go look it up. Very simple. And it's how Xbox is going to move, folks. They're going to give you an opportunity to play anywhere, everywhere, and choose the hardware that you want to play. If you're not a fan of Microsoft and you're a fan of Lenovo, you're probably going to be able to buy a box from them or a handheld from them. Obviously, Asus and ROG, well, they already have one, and they're going to continue this partnership. Alienware might make one. Pick your favorite manufacturer. It's a good chance that there's going to be some sort of a handheld or home console or even a dockable console that could be in the fray that doesn't actually come from Microsoft. So that's not an Xbox, but it plays all of your Xbox games and all of your Steam games and good old games and Epic games, but it's not an Xbox? Fuzzy, let's try and make some sense of this shenanigans.
Yeah, it's weird to me that people are so focused on whether this is an Xbox. Like you said, it has Xbox in the name, has an Xbox button, an Xbox UI. And I see a few statements in the chat as far as, well, it doesn't play Xbox games. I hate to tell you, Xbox makes games for PC, so they are still Xbox games. I don't know if comprehension is a tough thing, but if Xbox makes games for PC, and this plays the PC versions of them, are they not Xbox games? I don't know. But like, I look at it as this is the transition that they're moving into where you don't have to rely on, keeping old hardware or necessarily keeping multiple versions of similar hardware. You can basically have one box to kind of rule them all, which this is where the Xbox One name would have come in handy for this next generation. But being able to have access to these additional stores, I think is a good thing. And I'm not worried about if Xbox is making money off of the Steam store being there. Like, I think we need to really stop worrying about if a company makes money. because as long as we're enjoying the games, I think that's the key thing. Given that the industry is somewhat volatile, like sometimes they can make money and still things get, I guess you could say discontinued or closed or whatever you want to call it. But I think the main focus should be Xbox is providing this opportunity with this device moving forward where you can play their Play Anywhere titles, which, Play Anywhere means it's a console title and a PC title. You get the dual entitlement. You can basically play it on either device. You can stream it. You can download it, natively. That's the key thing that this is doing. Now, if they can expand upon the Play Anywhere, which I expect at some point, probably into the next generation, at least the first party stuff, and even, excuse me, some of the partnered second party stuff, like things like Rise, Son of Rome, or Dead Rising 3, which were exclusives for the Xbox One. I would like to see those get to the Play Anywhere stage by the time the next generation console comes out. And I think it's doable, considering they either have publishing rights or some ownership of those IP. So I can't imagine it being that difficult, whether it might be more money that they have to pay in licensing or, some sort of renegotiated contract amongst those either devs or other publishers, much like things like Quantum Break. That's a Play Anywhere title. I believe the saves were separate originally when it was, first launched, but now it looks like your save can continue, or at least I know of ways to be able to copy and sync those saves. So that way it's like a seamless playthrough, whether you jump from console or PC or one of these handhelds. But I think that's probably the biggest thing that people need to focus on, is that, moving forward, they're working towards getting all of the Xbox titles on these devices and making it so it blurs the line between console and PC. Now, is that something that happens overnight? I don't think it will, but I think within the matter of a couple of years, they could get a lot closer or just have a lot more devs. So if, let's say, 70% or 80% of your entire library is playable as far as Play Anywhere, or you've found a way, or maybe Xbox finds a way for physical discs to be converted, like they had rumored towards the later part of Xbox One, for going with this digital only type of process, which they're fully moving towards anyway. I think that's going to be some of the things to look forward to, whether they do some sort of a disc exchange program to get you a digital license or a digital key. And at that point you pick, hey, make it a Play Anywhere or play it on PC and new, the next gen Xbox device and these handhelds, so be it. But I don't know why people seem to take so much issue with a PlayStation game that was perfectly playable on a Steam Deck, perfectly playable, weeks before on a ROG Ally or a Legion Go or an MSI Claw or any of the IO Neo handheld devices. All along, those PlayStation titles that were available on Steam were playable there. So why is it anger them so much that now that Xbox is working with one of those partners on a handheld, and potentially maybe they still release their handheld, but further down the line, that these devices would be capable of playing these PlayStation titles? And because of that, it can't possibly be an Xbox, because Sony wouldn't allow that. But it's like, Sony wants money. Sony wants, games on PC, because that's additional money on the table that, for years they've kind of left there. And now they're realizing that might be a bigger way to go to expand their player base. Sure, they're selling tons of consoles, but if they're not selling tons of software like Nintendo tends to do with their first party stuff, where you might sell, was it 3.5 million, copies of the Switch 2, and I think they sold nearly that many, if not more, copies of Mario Kart. Now, granted, some people probably bought the cartridge and stuff like that, but it seems like Nintendo is the main one that does that great attach rate. PlayStation's kind of, scratching their head, whether it's the $70 price increase, well, not $70 increase, but the increase to $70 for their titles, and the potential for 80, like what Microsoft is trying to do now, if that, slows some of those sales. Because, PS4 generation, 20 million sales on title seemed to come rather easy on their first party, and even more so with some of the licensed stuff for like Spider-Man. But, moving into this generation, it seems like they top out at around 10 or 12. I don't think, and I could be wrong, that there's been a 20 million seller that's been a first party PlayStation title.
It might have been Spider-Man. Yeah, it might have been Spider-Man 2018, and I think God of War 2018, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and those I think were a lot easier to come by or a lot faster to come by in the PS4 generation than it is this generation. So Sony is, yeah, it may not be the greatest look of an Xbox device playing a PlayStation title, but I didn't see people raising arms about MLB. Sure, MLB themselves, wanted to expand their audience. So it's going to eventually be on the Switch as well. But it's one of those things where I think moving forward, we need to focus more so on the game output, just because, and it's not to be a knock to Sony's first party. They're still producing. It's just that it's not to the same level as far as frequency as it was during PS4. It seems like they rather sell you more remasters to finance the next title in the series or something to that effect, or basically hit you over the head a couple of times with the remaster of a remaster, which feels weird to me, but that's a whole nother story. Like if a title is 10 years old or more, remaster, I think it makes sense. But if a title is 3 or 4 years old or just at the tail end of the last generation, I don't know. It's definitely a different approach. But moving forward, people stop worrying about if it's an Xbox or not. If Xbox player base or Xbox people in the Xbox ecosystem are satisfied with the device, that should be the end of it. I know a lot of people were pushing back on the portal when people were complaining about the portal. I didn't see the value in it for me as somebody that has a PS5 because I can do remote play through my phone. And if I really want to, I can install Chiaki on my Steam Deck. Not the biggest fan of it because it feels like it's a hack and a bigger potential for information to be compromised. But in the grand scheme of things, that I didn't see the value. But for those that bought it, I'm not going to be like, well, you're an idiot because you bought it. No, I see the value for them if they're basically in their house on their Wi-Fi. Now, I think there have been some updates so you can go beyond your own home Wi-Fi as far as use and stuff, but it's not as pertinent for me because that the PlayStation titles that I would play aren't available on PC, and playing it on the portal, something like GT7 just doesn't appeal to me. But that's just me. Like, I'm not really the biggest fan of playing Forza Horizon on my Steam Deck. I'll do it if I'm like in the lobby while my car is getting an oil change or something, but it's not my go-to. I'd rather see that on the big screen, on my TV, or, even on the, what do you call them? The Meta Quest 3, where you have that big picture mode, because at that point it's like 100-inch screen right in front of your eyes kind of deal. But
yep,
I don't know. This whole thing about it's not an Xbox needs to stop. Find something else to wave a flag about. Like, I know there are people that want to talk about the potential layoffs. If they happen next week or whenever they are officially announced,
we'll discuss them. Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But why discuss it on like not necessarily a rumor? It might be a good inside note, but until it happens, what are we doing? Like, I'd rather focus on the games at the current moment. When bad news actually takes place, then we can focus on it then. But I think the big thing now is people need to look at this upcoming hardware and their approach with the new UI as a opening of doors. So that way, for titles that may have skipped Xbox and went to Steam, like things like Hades 2, sure, it's coming to Switch 2 here sooner than it will on PS5 or Xbox. But in the grand scheme of things, if you already bought it like I did while it's in preview on Steam, now you can play it on your Xbox device.
There you go.
I don't see a problem with that, but that's just me. I rather just have a device that has access to as many of my games that I own, as opposed to focusing on having 5 or 6 pieces of redundant hardware at that point. Like, I know a lot of people don't want to bother with an Xbox because they have a PC and they have a PS5. And that's great. It's kind of along the same lines. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, stop capping. But in the grand scheme of things, this is what works for me. I'm looking forward to getting my Xbox Ally X, provided it's not over $1,000, but we'll see what pricing dictates. But right now, I'm hoping it's that $800 to $900 range. And yes, I know there's a lot of people like, that's ridiculous for a handheld, but considering the power under the hood, it's worth it. But don't forget that Xbox Ally, the one in white, is still a good handheld. It's better than the current Steam Deck as far as power output. Given that Xbox UI and the capability of still being able to play Steam games, I would say it's a good purchase as well. But that's just me.
I thought that this was a great opening salvo. We do got to get Umbra's points of view on this regarding the handheld and what you're going to be able to do with it now and in the future. I really think that, again, Paris made a great point. Will this work for Xbox? We don't know. But I am going to tell you one of the things, Umbra, that we have seen from a lot of people, and this is not trolling, this is not console warring. These are general gamers who are excited about a future that has not been a part of gaming ever. Xbox needed to make a change because they were in third place. And they didn't want to keep banging their head against the wall and being just the third place Xbox. They did something, and they're going to continue to do things in the industry that are going to shake up the industry. They started in 2017, Umbra, with Xbox Game Pass, where they were told that there was no way this was sustainable. There was no way that this was people were going to take to it. And nearly 40 million subscribers later, people love it. It is the best value in gaming. I don't know why people still come out against it. It's very odd to me that I literally have people arguing with me who then eventually get blocked that I'd rather own my games by buying them, and you're a cheapskate, and it's welfare pass, and so many ridiculous things immediately blocked.
Shame tactics.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I do want to focus on the fact that insiders or PC Xbox insiders can now launch games from Steam on their ROG allies, and eventually they will be able to do this from the launch of the console later this year. And the rumor is October for the ROG, Xbox Ally and the Ally X that do actually have Xbox buttons on them. They worked closely with Asus to, again, to make this an Xbox device. It is an OEM device. It is not made by Xbox, but they did work on this console or these consoles to get it to where it's going to be when it launches later this year. The UI that's on display right now in the preview program is what's going to be launching on these handhelds later this year. And there are people in the community, and you've heard Paris specifically talk about it, as well as Fuzzy, where this is not an Xbox. Why are you guys calling it an Xbox? It's made by Asus. It's made by ROG. I don't know. Maybe because it has an Xbox button on it. Maybe because it literally has Xbox in the freaking title of the item. Maybe I'm seeing it wrong. I just want to get your thoughts on this because
folks get real pedantic when it comes to Xbox. I've noticed. Well, I mean, it's not that; it's really this, but it's actually a PC. It's not really Xbox, then, right? Ask yourself that. Xbox.
Now, do they sound like that? Is what I want to know.
That's how I imagine they sound. I don't know. I feel you have to be a super nerd or something. Like, well, it's not quite an Xbox, is it? Then I don't know what problem you have to have in your life that matters to you. I feel like you missed the plot. Something happened. But you know what? I'm going to take this opportunity to be petty, Umbra, today. Paris, I appreciate your high-mindedness. I appreciate your maturity. I'm going to be the very opposite, just for a thought experiment today. I had somebody hit me up, and I saw a brother's tweet, and he was like, oh, well, what's so special about this? I mean, we can do that now in Steam. You can get this and play these Xbox games and other games through the launcher in Steam. You just buy this or whatever, you add it in there. Brother, you do know we're talking about consoles eventually, right? Sure, it's not special yet for this. This is just the start. But once it comes to console, the difference is that they'll have the launchers there. They'll have Steam. They'll have GOG. They'll have Epic. It'll all be ingrained into the UX. This user experience for Xbox and the Xbox gamers is about to be something special. It's different. Why are you pretending like that's not what this is? It's an evolution. And I don't think people want to understand that. You know what I mean? And evolution by its very definition is a gradual development of something, especially to form a more complex form. This is evolution right here, baby. You got to keep up. but they want to tear it down. They don't want the truth. But that's why I'm going to be petty, Paris. For that special one moment in time, Paris, they're going to be mad at me. And that will bring me pleasure because they've upset me enough to make me be petty. And now I have to upset them enough to make them upset.